I think I just want to start with something I talked with Claire about when she was coming in. There's something I saw on our Facebook that I just want to use as an anchor to start this talk. Really blessed me. And the quotation was, when the power of love is greater than the love of power, then the world will know peace. That touched me. And on that note, I just want us to keep and sustain that in our spirit. I'll continue our Bless series, The Art of Neighboring. Now, the Bless strategy is not a new trend, and I don't think it's a buzzword. It's exactly the strategy used by Jesus, even during his earthly ministry. And that's what he has passed down to us to use to. Steve kicked up this series. Nick followed on with Begin with Prayer, which is the B. Steve followed on with Listen, how we need to listen to discover the needs of others and places around us. At our last gathering, Tammy dealt with Eat. He challenged us to share a meal and spend time with people in our life, even if it's just for 2 hours out of the 21 hours meal time we have in a week. I just want to sound a word of caution that whenever we're learning something from Christ, or maybe in church or wherever, I think the best way it can be useful to us is actually plan to do it. In Acts of Apostles, chapter 1, verse 1, I noticed a model that Jesus used during his lifetime. The Bible recorded what Jesus began to do and teach. The do was before the teach. The whole game is about we doing what he has laid down for us to do. That's the secret of growing. I liken that to Nike slogan, the trainers. Just do it. Well, let me start with a little story today, because I'll be handling the first S part of the blessed strategy of Jesus. I'll be handling serve, to serve. But I'll start with a story. In 1894, there was a British physicist called Lord Kelvin. Sorry, I'm an African. But this is very good story. I did sciences anyway. So this is interesting to me. They were in a kind of a gathering, British Association of Science, and this man made a bold declaration, what we could liken to, like dropping the mic, This is the statement of all time. And he made this declaration as if there is nothing else to know in physics anymore. Everything is done and dusted. All what we just need to do now is just precise measuring. But in hindsight, when we look at the story, it wasn't like he actually dropped the mic. It was like he dropped the ball. It was a big mistake. Why did I say that? 11 years later, there's somebody I want us to see on the board. That quirky man proved him wrong. He came up with a theory that changed the whole physics world upside down. Where the world was going 200 years prior, the idea of this quirky man turned the old world in the other direction. Why did I use that story? What Einstein did, the German genius, is what paradigm shift looks like. And that is what Jesus brought to the table. Remember the first quotation I gave? Jesus turned the whole concept of power upside down. Up till today, the world, the culture we live in, teaches us power is for control. Jesus said, no, power is for service. And I'd like us to go into a particular passage where he demonstrated that. And that is in John chapter 13, verses 12 to 17. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his cloth and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You called me teacher and Lord. I want us to note that. If he's the teacher, it means we are the student. If he's the Lord, it means we are the servant. That's our identity. And rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. Have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Now, this is a story we're all familiar about. This is a story of something that happened before that notable meal that Tammy talks about. The background to this is in another passage whereby the disciples, they were discussing amongst themselves. They were infected with the principle of the world of power that I talked about. They are already ganging up, hey, when we take over, Lord Jesus, who is going to be the number one? Jesus was he was hearing that rumor. James and John wants to be, we are going to be the capon. When we just take over from the Romans like this, we'll be the one calling the show. And when they got to this meal table, to hang out, Jesus did something that was a little bit strange. He took off before the meal, the Jewish culture, they need to do the washing and all that. But he did something before the meal. He took off his shirt. He took on an apron. And he began to wash their feet. Now, I want us to remember something. In that culture, it's a kind of honor and shame culture, whereby the one that is powerful must be served by the one that is lower. In that room, there is no servant to wash the feet. Everybody was like playing the saxophone dance kind of thing, Maybe somebody would do it, but nobody was expecting that Jesus is the one that is going to do it. What am I on about? Why is that so important that Jesus was the one that bent down to do it? Let me paint a picture to help us understand how serious this is. Let's just say next week we are going to have our church on the table. And then Steve and Tammy just got a kind of a phone call from King Charles. Hey, I'm going to hang out with you guys next week. Wow. Say, man, this is huge. And then King Charles just pop up, and then we've had the food, we have our chat, bam, bam, bam. And lo and behold, we finished the meal, and King Charles starts packing the table. What's going on? I, for one, will feel uncomfortable. Not only packing the table, he went to the kitchen and started washing. I don't think we get the picture. That's a paradigm shift, the greatest of all time. That's what Jesus did. Peter was not going to have it. Why are you doing this? They have what we call like an honor score, just like our credit score. We think you're going to be the Messiah, you're just tanking your score to 0. I feel sarcastically he was telling Jesus, okay, if you want to tank your score to 0, just wash with my whole body then. He didn't really get it. The point Jesus was trying to make to them is this. Number one, he set his crown aside for an apron. Each one of us, we have our crown. Crown of career, crown of nationality, crown of ideology, different kind of things, status and wealth. We cannot serve for Jesus until we let down these crowns for an apron of service. There's no way. So what Jesus is telling them is, whatever power you've got, whether in terms of time, talent, and treasure, you must be willing to serve those who are down, those who are powerless with it. And that's the message of Jesus. Not only did he set aside his crown for an apron, later on, he set aside his apron for a cross. Matthew chapter 20, verse 28 says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, that's from Jesus' mouth himself, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That is the greatest service of all time. And I believe you agree with me. But let's move on from that. Let's look into, that's what he taught about service. Basically, he's telling us, when you have power, power is for you to serve others, simply put. It's not for you to look unto others to serve you. The privilege and the power you have is for serving others. That's just a simple message, and that's the challenge to us. But how did Jesus serve? We go into Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37. It says, then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. I want us to keep in mind that word, Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his finger into the man's hair. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephatata, which means be opened. I want us to take note of that, be opened too. At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. But the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well. They said, he even made the deaf hear and the mute speak. So this is a story of a nameless, deaf and mute man of Decapolis. I want us to note something about the place called Decapolis. You know, we've learned that we need to listen to people, and we learned that we need to listen to places. Thank you for the opportunity to prepare for this sermon, because all my years, I learned something new every day. That's the opportunity I had. I dig in to go and research, what is it about this Decapolis? It appears 3 times in the scripture. Number one, what I figured out is when you look at the map of Israel in those days, Galilee has 2 sides. There is something we call the Galilee of the Jews and then the Galilee of the Gentiles. The Galilee of the Gentiles, that's this Decapolis. It's what we can call the Sin City. Let me paint it better. Decapolis is where Jesus healed, one of the 10 cities of Decapolis is where Jesus healed the madman from Gadarene. That is where he healed this particular deaf man. We need to see the link here. Whenever you see Jesus said, let's go to the other side, I want us to take this very, I want us to catch this. Serving our neighbor is not a walk in the park. It requires compassion. It requires our ability to cross over racial differences, cross over political differences, cross over all those things that divide us. It will touch our vulnerability. It's very challenging and it's very costly. You just need to check the story, the parable of the Good Samaritan to get that. So serving others is super challenging. So when you see Jesus talk about go to the other side, is a word you call toperan. That is, you are moving to the dark side. But yet, Decapolis is a place that we call a place that has the Hellenistic culture. That Hellenistic culture is still well and alive today in the Western world. Alexander the Great was the one that established that place, and then is a place whereby it did not just only go for military conquest. It spread the culture of the Greek too. And that place is like a showpiece of the beauty and the strength of what, because underneath Hellenism is humanism. The ability that human being can attain the highest productivity by bodily exercise and mind development, physical and mental development. So they have the language, they have the education, they have the religion, they have athleticism, and they have entertainment. That is ringing a bell to me in modern world. It's a place whereby there is wealth, there is power, there is technology, there is leisure, and unrestrained sexual activity. That is Decapolis for you. Yet, Jesus decides to cross over, to go there. Why? To serve. To serve. So that is the background of what this story is about. Jesus deciding to go over to the dark side. When he got there, I want us to see the 4 lessons I learned. So it means he has listened to the place, he understands the need. Now, God now took him to go and start with just one person. That's the reason why the strategy is about us trying to reach our neighbor. If we want to reach the city, we need to start with the next person near us. So the first thing I learned from that passage is The people that Jesus served were always the people right in front of him, near him, those in close proximity. And we need to do that also. But there is an exception. The exception is one of the reasons why I'm even here today. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When we look at verse 31, the Bible says that, again he departed from the border of Tyre and Sidon and came to the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the region of Decapolis. That means he was in one place. It shows the humanity of Jesus. And the Father just filtered to him, hey, you have a business on the other side. Turn around where possible. So he was not in proximity to the person he needed to serve. God had to take him back to where he needed to serve. So what I'm trying to say is this. Sometimes we might be somewhere because we've got a promotion. Or probably we are somewhere because we think, oh, that's a good catchment for school. Those are all good things. But we must always be willing for a divine disruption. Anytime God can say, turn around where possible. That's just what I want. Because God, evangelicals will say, the last promise of Jesus is go into all the world. What I'm trying to say is sometimes he says to some people, stay where you are. It is not all the time he says, go. So he served that man proximally. So we too, instead of thinking of taking over the city, let's start with the person right next to us, our neighbor. The second thing is, he served the man perceptively. Don't forget that man cannot speak properly, is mute, and he cannot hear. The problem of that man is more beyond just deafness and muteness. The problem of that man is that he's isolated and frustrated even in the midst of the party. Decapolis is a bubbling place. Don't forget the Hellenistic culture. You are useless when you are not physically sound and you don't have the ability to develop yourself mentally. They pride themselves in philosophy. They are the smartest ever. And now you are deaf. You cannot assimilate ideas. You cannot share your thoughts. You are a reject. That was his situation. His situation is more than just deafness. He was a reject. And Jesus sees beyond just deafness. Jesus wants to open his life up. Now, prophetically, I just want us to understand, some of us might need that. For Jesus, I personally would need that, for Jesus to speak into my life where there needs for openness, so that I can speak openness into the life of others. So he served the man perceptively. The third way he served the man is personally. When he looked up to heaven and he sighed, Ephphatha, he took it personal. It wasn't just perceptively, it wasn't just proximately. He was feeling the pain of that man. That's why he cried out. It wasn't just a sigh, it was a groan. So whoever we are called to serve, we need to feel their pain. Serving others is going to get personal, and it needs to be. Fourthly, he served the man powerfully. Whenever we need to serve our neighbor, we must not forget we need to draw on the power of heaven. It shouldn't be an afterthought. Don't forget, on the other side, it's a dark side. When we meet challenging situations, when we discover some needs in the people we need to serve, when the going gets tough, we must look to heaven and tap on the power of God. So those are the 4 things I learned from the way how Jesus served. And as I draw this talk to a close, I want to ask us again, what crown do we need to put down to bless someone through serving them? Is it our time? Is it our pride? Is it our convenience? Is it our status? Is it our position? Is it our nationality? Is it our career? Is it our ideology? What would it look like for us to put down our crown and put on an apron at home with our spouse, with our children, with our roommates, or with our co-workers? What would it look like if our small group or church become a community of people who are simply willing to serve? So I'd like to introduce us to a tool as I close called the RPMS tool. In fact, I choose to modify it with one thing I feel is missing. I feel there should be F there. Because when we are trying to serve others, that RPMS tool stands for relationship. It's like a well-being tool. So R is for relational, P is for physical, M is for mental, S is for spiritual. We could use it to assess ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. So don't forget I add F, financial. The idea was inspired by Luke 2:52, where the Bible described the development of Jesus. The Bible made it clear that he grew in favor with men, which is relational. He grew in stature, which is physical. He grew in wisdom, which is mental. He grew in favor with God, which is spiritual. But in modern day, I had F. Because when we are trying to serve others, when we have listened and eat with them, when we have prayed for them, we need to listen to these areas of well-being in their life. Because when we realize any of these areas, if it is lacking, then we can know exactly how to serve them. How is my neighbor doing relationally? Are they feeling lonely? Are they going through difficult relationship? How is my neighbor doing physically? How is their overall health? Do they mention not being able to sleep? How is my neighbor doing mentally? Are there signs of anxiety? Is there any indication of depression? How is my neighbor doing spiritually? Do they sense something is missing in their life? Are they willing to have you pray for them? Do they display spiritual curiosity? And I'll say this. Just as we ourselves and God, when we monitor our RPMS/F, we can bless others in the same 4 areas or 5 areas, as I say. Once we identify our neighbor's need, the next thing is this: serve them. And the last slide I want us to look at why we need to go into action mode. The Office of National Statistics Census 2021 statistics shows the younger people in England and Wales are now more likely to be non-religious than Christian. That means the Decapolis is taking over. Starting from our neighbors to our co-workers, we can find people who are so caught up in the Decapolis lifestyle. But as a scattered servant, I just have to go into our strategy in Garden City Vineyard. We have missions and we have values. I want us to familiarize ourselves with it. But one of our strategy is for all of us to become scattered servants. But as scattered servants, we can change that statistics by blessing our neighbors. Perhaps some of them will come back to God and in turn become a blesser. God bless.